The concept of queerness has been negatively depicted throughout history. As Carrie Mallon stated in her chapter on queer, queer was once used as a pejorative term for a male homosexual. The negative connotation persists today due to its use in homophobic abuse. I think was most aptly defined, or rather not defined, by Michelle Abbate in her quote, "Queerness defies definition. Indeed, is the antidote to definition in any easy or clear sense. The term at once fortifies and dismantles the notion of a stable or knowable self in relation to gender and sexuality especially but not exclusively. Even though experts in the queer community agree on the inherent fluidity of queerness, the general public can't seem to grasp this notion. They think that queerness is supposed to remain static within the queer community, a misconception that can't be held. I made this video with the sole purpose of answering the question, does queerness remain constant with changes to landscape? I believe that no, changes in landscape will result in a different queer culture because of the change in human population and culture that exist within a landscape. We'll explore landscape more in the next slide. Before continuing my analysis, I should define what a landscape is. A landscape is a result of human and geographical interactions. The two components of landscape, human and geography, make it an interesting topic to research. A landscape change not only occurs when the geography changes, but also when the human population changes. Changing the occupants of a landscape generally leads to development of new cultures and traditions. In my analysis, I will focus on the human and landscape differences and how the queer community varies within each landscape. The novel I plan on analyzing is Juliet Takes a Breath by Gabby Rivera. This novel has three main landscapes: the Bronx, Portland, and Miami. I plan on analyzing each of the queer communities within each landscape. Furthermore, I want to compare the queer communities within two of the landscapes, specifically Portland and Miami. Early on in the novel, Juliet lays down what her expectations are for the Portland community. She hopes to see just groups of young, gay weirdos being able to chill and be free without hassle from anyone. She thinks that, yeah, everyone would probably be white, but white people seem to be totally okay with gay stuff and just being different in general. I started at this quote because learning about her expectations for Portland helps us learn more about what the queer community faces in the Bronx. Her hope of being free from hassle from anyone shows us that in the Bronx, the LGBTQ people are treated as a nuisance and are constantly harassed. Furthermore, the pro con thought process between everyone being white and everyone being okay with gay stuff in Portland shows us that Juliet believes the root cause for homophobia and transphobia in the Bronx lies within race. Jumping ahead nearly 60 pages, Juliet recalls that being around other gay people made me feel nervous, like someone was going to see us out in the world and we'd be targets. This simile is really powerful because it shows us the severity and the societal pressure that Juliet faces on a daily basis in the Bronx. When someone when someone has a target on their back, it generally means that they face a disproportionate amount of hate and homophobia in this case. She also claims that the stress of being outed or attacked in public lived under my skin at home. This further adds to the harassment and violence LGBTQ people have to face in the Bronx. Her being stressed out about such a topic, about being attacked, is something she shouldn't have to face, yet she does in the Bronx. My analysis thus far has been about how others view the LGBTQ population in the Bronx. The disdain for LGBTQ people in the Bronx leads me to believe that the queer community there is very small. It's human nature to want to fit in and be liked. If the disdain for LGBTQ people is so high, then it's likely that most citizens of the Bronx are either cis and straight or haven't come out yet. The next landscape Juliet visits is Portland. There she meets Harlow and her assistant, Fen. Early in the novel, Fen mentions that Portland lesbians worship Harlow, literati can't get enough of her, and I'm surprised you haven't received death threats. The use of words like worship and death is reminiscent of religion. Such words makes Portland's queer community seem like a cult following Harlow. A bit later, Fen bombards Juliet with questions and is amused by her ignorance. Fen has already stated that he is jealous of Juliet's position. The rapid-fire questions and Fen's being entertained instead of helping portrays him as a gatekeeper of sorts to Harlow's work, and thus the Portland queer community. Later in the novel, Harlow explains how it is the duty of white women to stand in solidarity with queer, trans, women of color, listen to their needs, and make sure that feminism and sisterhood brings all of our voices together. She later states that We're the ones that need to give women of color space for their voices. Phrases like duty of white women and we're the ones that need to give shows Harlow's inherent white-centeredness. Her wording makes it seem as if people of color require something from white women in order to be a catalyst for change. Because Harlow is idolized by the Portland queer community, it can be generalized that the Portland queer community as a whole is also white-centered. The final landscape I'll be looking at is Miami. After Harlow's betrayal, Juliet travels to Miami to meet with her cousin and aunt and learn the answers to her questions. A significant part of her time in Miami is the Clipper Queers Party. The Clipper Queers crew through events for queer and trans people of color only. No white allies, be they lover, family, or otherwise. When Juliet questioned Ava about the morality in ditching all white people, Ava responds by saying, "No, I don't feel weird. You were just looking at to make all the room for white people, aren't you?" These quotes work together to show the equality within the Miami queer community. The Clipper Queers Party is a time where queer people of color can make their voices heard. The refusal of white people at the party, regardless of whether they are white allies, is in stark contrast to Portland queer gatherings. In Portland, white LGBTQ people were everywhere, leading to their overrepresentation within the community. The strict Clipper Queers rules that Ava abides to helps maintain a racial balance within the Miami LGBTQ community. Another hallmark of this community is how accepting they are. At a party with complete strangers, Juliet felt she wasn't alone. People flowed in and around me all night. The chromamorphism of people flowing helps describe how Juliet and everyone is excited to meet each other. Another characteristic of the Miami queer community is that they all have their own unique ideas about society. I won't read the quote on the screen. It's more important to note the demeanor in which Florencio and Ava debate. Though they have different ideas, they are able to respectfully discuss their thoughts. This is also in stark contrast to the Portland queer community. There, most people were Harlow fanatics that swore by her ideals and rarely had unique ideas. Moving on, I'd like to summarize the three queer communities in each of the landscapes we discussed. In the Bronx, due to violence, the queer community is really small. In Portland, the queer community is cultish, closed off, and white-centered, and in Miami, the community is equal, independent, and accepting. It's interesting to note that Portland and Miami's queer communities each display nearly the exact opposite characteristics. It's clear that when the landscape changes, so do the characteristics of the queer community. When comparing Portland and Miami, I see one main reason for the vast differences between the LGBTQ populations. In Portland, the 70.5% of people are white. However, in Miami, 84.8% of citizens are either Hispanic or black. This could explain why Portland is extremely white-centered, whereas Miami is relatively equal within their LGBTQ communities. To everyone that got this far, congratulations. I hope the presentation was helpful, especially for young adults struggling to understand their gender or sexuality. To the non-queer viewer, I urge you to continue learning about the queer community. What I've shared today scratches the tip of an iceberg of knowledge. To those of you asking what the purpose of this video is, it is twofold. One, to clear the public's misconceptions about static queerness, and two, to show that no matter the person, there was always a landscape and community for you. Thank you.